All right, now we're going to talk about elementary cryptography. So cryptography comes from the roots crypto and graphy, crypto meaning secret and graphy meaning writing. So it's all about secret writing. And cryptography is the timeless art of making information hard to read, hard to modify or fabricate. So hard to read gives you, of course, confidentiality. Hard to modify or fabricate gives you integrity. Now, does it automatically give you 100% integrity? No. Okay, not 100% and not perfect. Okay, we'll talk about this more later. But it can help provide integrity. There's something related called steganography, and that is hiding information. So steganography means hiding information in something else. So taking the classic story about steganography is shaving somebody's head, tattooing a message on their scalp, letting their hair grow back, and then having the messenger go and give the message to somebody. They can shave the head and get the message back. The message isn't encrypted, but it's hidden. That's steganography. Encryption is about changing the message in some way so that it can't be understood. Eventually, we'll talk about some historical ciphers as we go. People have been trying to do cryptography almost since we learned how to write and read. Okay, cryptography has its basis in mathematics, right? It isn't just a puzzle or a trick. Math allows us to substitute one symbol for another. So we can translate from A to F, for example, and that's substitution. Math also allows us to transpose or permute the symbols. Okay, so A to F is a substitution of A to the symbol F. If we had A, B, C, a permutation of that might be C, A, B. Okay, so that's transposition. And pretty much all cryptography centers around substitution or transposition. If the crypto is strong, meaning a good algorithm, and the key is randomly chosen and everything is done correctly, it makes the original message statistically impossible to recover without the key. Or maybe instead of impossible, I should say extremely unlikely. Okay, so in practice, if you can figure out the key, then you can decrypt the message. But if the key is large and it's randomly chosen, then it's statistically very hard for you to find that key. Now, if the encryption is weak, if it's poor, if it's a bad encryption algorithm, then it might make it harder to get the original message, but still reasonable to recover it in a reasonable amount of time. Okay? And a lot of the algorithms we'll talk about in this class and we'll teach you so you understand how cryptography works are actually weak algorithms. Okay, but we're doing it because they're simple enough to understand easily. This is very important. Cryptography is hard, and you are not a cryptographer. Okay, I'm not a cryptographer either. It's not my area of research. Okay, do not make your own cryptographic algorithms that you use for something meaningful. Okay, if you want to make crypto algorithms for fun and try them out with your friends and stuff, that's awesome. Don't ever use them for something good, because people regularly invent their own crypto algorithms that then have some fatal flaws, and then terrible things happen. Okay, things leak out that aren't supposed to. This class is not going to teach you how to make secure ciphers. Instead, use trusted open source crypto like AES, okay, for your projects. Okay, we'll talk more about all of this later, but do not invent and use your own crypto for anything meaningful. Let's talk about terminology. There's a lot here, but a lot of cryptography is going to use the same kind of ideas. Okay, so first of all, cryptography uses what's called modular arithmetic. And what that means is that the numbers wrap around. So if I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we're going to go around in this order. Okay, so if let's say I did a shift of 3. So I started with 0. 0 is going to shift 3. 1, 2, 3 to 3. Okay? If I start with 3, 3 is going to shift 3, 4, 5, 6 to 6. 7 is going to shift 3, 1, 2, 3 to 2. Okay, that's modular arithmetic, right, in action. Okay, so we're going to wrap around in whatever our space of numbers is. Okay, so we added 3 to 0 and got 3. We added 3 to 6 and got, or 3 to 3 and got 6. We added 3 to 7. We got 2 because 10 isn't an option. Okay, that's modular arithmetic. We also talk about algorithms or ciphers. Okay, so an algorithm or a cipher is a specific kind of encryption algorithm. Okay, so encryption algorithm A means a process that encrypts data in a certain way, and encryption algorithm B would be a process that encrypts data in a different way. If it encrypted it in the same way, then it would be algorithm A, right? So it's a specific algorithm. Sometimes we'll talk about a particular cipher, cipher A versus cipher B. What that just means is the algorithm in question is an encryption algorithm, if we're calling it a cipher. Okay? Encryption algorithms typically have unique names. So AES means, it's not written here, but AES stands for the Advanced Encryption Standard. Okay, but there are lots of other encryption algorithms too, like DES, which is terrible and you should never use. WPA, also terrible, you should never use. Blowfish, Twofish, and so on, right? So we give algorithms names so we know what we're talking about, okay? I'm going to erase some of this stuff for space. All right. A key parameterizes an algorithm. So for a given algorithm, it's going to take a key. It's going to take a message, sometimes called a plain text, the unencrypted input. It can also take in ciphertext if we're decrypting. Okay, so for decrypting, we're going to take in a ciphertext message. If we're encrypting, we're going to take in a plain text message. And so if I have some algorithm A, I'm going to provide a key K and a message. And if this message is a plain text, we're going to get something encrypted. So I'm going to, if you see these examples here, I'm going to call this message P for plain text to indicate that it's a plain text. And it's going to produce a ciphertext C. And then if I use the decryption form of that algorithm, and I use the key K and the ciphertext, then I'm going to get the plain text back. So if I use the encryption form of A, I get the ciphertext. If I use the decryption form of A, I'm going to get the plain text back. Okay? This, incidentally, is called symmetric encryption. All right. So again, plain text here and ciphertext here. These are just sets of messages, sets of different plain text messages, the things that you want to send. Ciphertexts are the set of the encrypted messages, right? So any plain text with a given key is going to have a particular ciphertext that comes out of it. Now, in this example here, if I did encryption of A with a different key, I'll call this key prime, and the same plain text, I will get a different ciphertext out, okay? Different key, different ciphertext, even though the message, P, is the same, all right? Now, if I took the decryption, again using our new key and our new ciphertext, I'll get the plain text back, okay? And that's because in this example, the keys match, all right? But if I tried to say decrypt using the original key up here, our new ciphertext, C prime, I'm going to get out something completely different. Okay, so again, the example here that I'm saying is if I use a different key, this is our first key, to decrypt a ciphertext not created with that key, I don't have any guarantee about what I will get out. Okay, it probably won't be the original message. It could be, but that's very unlikely, especially if it's a good algorithm. Okay, so the keys need to match. Just to reiterate some of this, so encryption is a function where we encrypt some plain text. Without a key, that would be encrypting the plain text, and I get C out. With a key, just like I showed here, I'm going to encrypt with the key K and the plain text P, and I'll get ciphertext. Decrypting, without a key, decrypt C and I get P. With the key, with the key would be all modern systems. Some toy systems don't use a key. With the key, decrypt key K, the ciphertext, and I get the plain text out. Okay? I'd stop and ask for some questions here, but if you have questions, put them in Slack. Encryption can be symmetric or asymmetric. So everything that I have talked about so far is symmetric. And what that means is symmetric crypto uses the same key for encryption and decryption. Okay? It's symmetric because it uses the same key in both directions. Asymmetric crypto uses a different key for encrypting and decrypting. We're going to talk about this quite a lot later, so I'm not going to go into great detail here, but having a different key for encryption and decryption gives us some really cool powers that we'll use to improve security. Now, a really important idea about crypto is a thing called work factor. Okay? Now, I said before that if the encryption is strong, it's going to be statistically impossible or very unlikely to you would be able to decrypt it. Really what that means is how many different keys do you need to try, what can you guess about the algorithm, and so on. So work factor is saying how hard is it going to be to break or attack this system? How many steps will it take me to undo this cryptography? And strong encryption, the ciphertext is going to be statistically random. So the only way that we can decrypt it is to guess the key until we get it right. Now I want to talk about that for a little second. Okay? So suppose that this function A that we're using is a strong encryption, means it's a good algorithm, it really randomizes the data. And then we have some key and some plain text, and we've produced a ciphertext. Okay? And our bad guy wants to read this ciphertext, okay? And they know that we used algorithm A, say because it's the world standard encryption algorithm. So the only way that the bad guy can figure out what this message really is, the only way they can get P is if they can guess K, okay? What is K? Right? If they can guess K, then they can do the decryption. Okay? If they can guess K, then the bad guy can do decryption with K and the ciphertext and get P out. That's their goal. Okay? Now, suppose that K is, what if K is 4 bits? Okay? How many 4-bit values are there? Well, there's 16, 0 to 15. Okay? So if my key K is only 4 bits, then the attacker only has to try them all. Right? So that's called brute forcing. Okay? What if K is 32 bits? Okay? If K is 32 bits, all right, what if the key is 32 bits? Well, how many possible 32-bit keys are there? Well, there are 2 to the 32, okay? That works out to be 4.3 billion keys, okay? That seems like a lot, okay? But remember that a CPU, modern CPU, is something like, 3 gigahertz, right? So that means 3 billion operations per second. So actually, decrypting 4.3 billion keys isn't that impractical, right? So instead, in reality, we're going to use things like 128-bit keys, okay? And 2 to the 128 is a really big number. We're going to talk about that later, okay? 2 to the 128 or more, okay? And so what we're talking about is creating this huge space of potential keys and that makes it hard for the attacker to guess, as long as there's no weakness in the crypto that reveals the answer. Okay? Again, if the encryption is weak, if it's not statistically random, if there are clues left in the ciphertext about the original, then an attacker can use that to try to break it. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about cryptanalysis and when we talk about the weaknesses in certain algorithms. Okay? So this was an introduction to the ideas of cryptography. We have the basics here of substitution and transposition, and how cryptography is really about math and the secrecy of the key. And we talked about how we use the functions of cryptography, how it's reversible, how symmetric encryption uses the same key, whereas asymmetric encryption will use a different key. We talked about work factor, about how if the algorithm really is a strong randomizer, then the work factor, the difficulty of breaking the crypto, really comes down to guessing the key. And the bigger the key, the more bits in the key, the larger the space is, and thus the harder to guess.